everybody. If you could all take your seats. Good evening, everybody. My name is Gabby. I'm the Associate Director for the Biopharma Research Council. Welcome to D3D, Data, Drugs, and Diagnostics. This is the meetup portion of our group. I'm from the Biopharma Research Council. We're an association for scientists, business professionals, and IT experts across all the many silos of biomedical research. It's our mission to stimulate partnerships and collaborations. We do that through symposiums and educational programs like these, through webinars, and we'd be happy to work with everyone here. We have several more educational events coming up, the first being a D3D webinar that's happening on September 10th. It's 11 a.m. on September 10th. It's optimizing preclinical workflows. We also have an event with the NIH in September. It's at the end of September. It's called Altering the Microbiome. That's free for attendees. If you'd like any information about that, you can see me or Joanne. We'd be happy to talk to you about it. And we have another event coming up at the end of October. That's RTP. That's a Triangle Biotech Research Symposium. It's the fourth one we've done. It's a very successful event. So if you're interested in any information about that as well, we'd be happy to talk to you about that also. Thank you all for coming. We're happy to have you. I'd like to introduce Joanne, our Executive Director. Joanne Geer.
Thank you. Yes, give her. Good job, Gabby. Well, I'm very grateful to have someone to work with me on a day-to-day basis. It's a really fantastic help. I'd just like to acknowledge a couple of people before we get going. I see Sean, I see Chris. There you are. I don't see Moshe in the room, so I'm going to let you cover for the whole story, okay, Chris? Come on up. As you know, we're inside the beautiful Bell Works where the transistor was invented.
Yeah. Oh, here comes Moshe right now.
We just announced you. Come on in.
Yeah. Actually, let Moshe go first. That's kind of the appropriate transition.
Yeah, I heard it. Welcome, everyone, to Bell Works. Thank you for coming. It's a pleasure to host you guys. As you can see, my name is Moshe Gross. I've been on this project for about 2 years. Basically, it's evolved to giving lots of tours to large groups out there. We've been seeing many people have been through this, who've been to this building, who've worked in this building in the past. There's a lot of history over here. The architecture is truly amazing in this building, and we're hoping that it could really fill up again with its new future, which will be multi-use, mixed use. There'll be retail in the building. There'll be a large medical space, pharmacy, fitness center, a hotel in the space, obviously office space, and that's what really makes it really, really feasible to make this project really go on. And of course, the outside of the building, there's a lot of development going on outside. There'll be houses built by Toll Brothers. There will be eventually a sports center outside. So there's a lot going on over here. It's really exciting. You guys are here. It's still early in the stage. You get to see it now, and you'll see it eventually when it fills up a lot more. Thanks for coming again, and I'll pass the mic on.
Thanks, Moshe. All right, so hi, my name is Chris Palais. Likewise, thank you for coming out tonight. It's really fun to see these types of events starting to take place, and some great speakers come out and giving great information, and so I'm excited for that. So just a brief overview of what we're doing here as part of the Bell Works project. We're working on a co-working space that's also turning into an incubator. It's called VI. You'll see the space out across the way. We'll go out to it later on and give a tour. But it's just that, if you're not familiar with the co-working space or what that is, it's if you can imagine networking while you're working. It's a very collaborative environment. It's more of a membership model as opposed to like a full lease, and it's really for encouraging cross-pollination and innovation between different groups. And so you're able to meet people who may support you or maybe just help you bounce ideas around and these types of things that you might expect in a collaborative environment. So that's simply that. You'll see more about it when we get out there. It's a great space. It's a lot of fun to be a part of the Bell Works project and seeing it kind of evolve every day. And I just want to underscore, as Moshe was saying, it really is neat to see the revitalization happening out here in Homedale. So again, thank you very much. I won't take any more time from the panel, and enjoy the evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. So it's a pretty beautiful space they've gotten started over there. It's I think it's a really wonderful thing that we can be part of the rejuvenation of this building. It was actually empty for, I guess, at least 5 years. So a huge investment has been put into it already to make it viable for what we're doing now. And as you can see when you walk around, there's lots of room. I just want to quickly acknowledge the people that have made the Biopharma Research Council possible and this evening. We are collaborating tonight with BellWorks, you just learned about, also with the Technology Council of New Jersey, which is a great organization that we like to work with. And I want to acknowledge Planet Connect, which is a company that has been in business for about 20 years that organizes internal proprietary conferences for major pharmaceutical companies, which had the vision about 6.5 years ago to start the Biopharma Research Council. A lot of us, Gabby told you, our mission is to get scientists talking to each other. And so we focus on research, and as there are greener shoots in New Jersey and more energy is coming toward new companies, we're integrating more stories about entrepreneurship and commercialization as well. So I'm going to hand it over to our panel. Everyone's bio is in your handout, so we'll go straight into our content. I'm going to introduce Danielle Macario.
Thank you, Joanne. And thank you to the Biopharma Research Council for inviting us all here tonight. All right, so I'm going to start with our main topic for the night, which is the emerging FDA pathway for healthcare apps. And I'm going to go into a little bit of background before I get started, but just a disclaimer. I work at Schulman Associates Institutional Review Board, reviewing clinical trials, and my opinions do not necessarily reflect those of my company or the FDA. Okay, so what is a medical device? Let's get real basic here. I'm sure all of you know this, but this is the technical definition that is provided. Section 201H of the Food and Drugs Cosmetic Act defined a medical device as any healthcare product that does not achieve its principal intended purposes by chemical action or by being metabolized, as simple as tongue depressor, or it can be complex as a robotic surgical device. So if you have questions about whether your product is a device, this right here is a very good resource to start. And it'll give you lots of information, a lot of examples. However, I think with the development of all these new mobile medical apps, it may not quite be captured in this list here. So as I go on, I'll try and expand a little bit about what those are categorized as. So how does a device get to market? This is something that I think many of you are in development in right now. Some of you have already developed devices and gotten them to market, and some of you are just contemplating the concept. So the first step would be to classify your device. And that's what kind of device is it, and I'll get into that in the next slide. Step 2, choose the correct pre-market submission pathway. Step 3, prepare the appropriate information for your pre-market submission to the FDA, if it is required. I will give that caveat. Step 4, send your pre-market submission to the FDA and interact with FDA staff during your review. And step 5, you complete the establishment registration and device listing. So in terms of device classification, you can fall into many different categories. So there's class 1, which is the lowest risk. General controls, most are exempt from pre-market submission. An example of this would be a toothbrush. Class 2 is moderate risk. It involves special controls, and those are defined in the FDA guidance documents. And you require a pre-market submission or a 510K. Examples of this would be male condoms, non-invasive blood pressure monitors, and so on. Class 3 would be the highest risk, and those would require pre-market application, so a PMA. And that would be a replacement heart valve, breast implant, anything that could be life-sustaining or completely detrimental to your health if something ruptures or is damaged inside your body. Now, there's a separate category called Class 1 exempt, and I think this is where a lot of the mobile medical apps are going to fall. There's a generic category of exempt and Class 1 devices, and this is the class here. The PMA and FDA clearance are not required before marketing this device in the US. The manufacturer is required to register their establishment and list their generic product with the FDA, though. And examples of this include manual stethoscopes, mercury thermometers, and bedpans. So there's exempt devices, and this may be a good resource to also look at in case you're interested in following that. Okay, so there's many device pathways, and this just gives you a mapping network on all the ways that can be processed for any of your devices, mobile medical apps, or what have you. So you can go through the PMA, as I mentioned, the 510K, de novo's kind of a new one. It involves Class 3 designation classification for novel devices where they don't fit into the other categories, like a 510K. There's a humanitarian use device or exemptions, and those are usually Class 2, 3 devices as well. And the IDE process is part of getting it approved into one of these categories. So in terms of a mobile medical application, what is it? It's a mobile medical app. It meets the definition of a device in Section 201H of the Federal Food and Drug and Cosmetic Act, and either is intended to be used as an accessory to a regulated medical device or to transform a mobile platform into a regulated medical device. Now, it is also considered a subset of mobile apps that are the focus of the FDA's regulatory oversight. And I'm sorry this is kind of small, but it gives a lot of information here. So we have mobile medical apps, which are the top category. This is the smallest category in which the FDA will be actually looking at and regulating. The next category down is lower risk mobile apps that meet the definition of a device, but they're not mobile medical apps. And those are under enforcement discretion. And then the third category are mobile apps that are not considered medical devices, and there's no regulatory requirements whatsoever for those. So your devices could fit into any one of these three categories. Some examples of the mobile medical apps would be apps that produce or facilitate supplemental clinical care by coaching or prompting, mobile apps that provide patients with simple tools to organize or track their health information, mobile apps that provide easy access to information related to patients' health conditions or treatments, apps that are marketed to help patients document, show, or communicate to providers potential medical conditions that they may have, and mobile apps that perform simple calculations routinely used in clinical practice, or apps that enable individuals to interact with personal health record or electronic health record systems. So those are very, very key for knowing what type of category that you're going to fit into. The next group, enforcement discretion. The FDA may decide to regulate you. It may not. And that all is going to depend on the level of risk that your device poses to subjects and the consumer. So it's all relative here, and they may change their mind if they see some data coming out and say, no, we are going to actually enforce regulations on you. So you have to be careful about that category. So just as a general schema, this is kind of the lowest monitoring to the highest monitoring that the FDA will follow. And with that, I will pass it on so we can learn more about each of the devices that are out there and being developed. And take it away.
I've got one.
Oh, you've got one. Thank you.
Thanks, Danielle. Thanks, Joanne, for having me here. It's always a pleasure to work with the VRC. I have great events, and I've had great feedback from working with your group. I'm here to talk about my company, IntelliSante, and our software product called C3 HealthLink, which is a mobile medical app. We have a HIPAA-compliant application that is designed for care coordination and collaboration in the healthcare system. And it has these various functionalities that give benefit to patients, to physicians, to payers and insurance companies, and to hospitals. is on top of the functionality that it provides to these various groups and individuals. It also serves as a data exchange and communication platform that's on demand, because my system is patient-centric. It's a patient-centric personal health record that has other functionalities that enable HIPAA-compliant connection among a care team, physician, nurse, caregiver, specialist, psychologist, regardless of their medical institution affiliation. So it's not like the electronic medical record, but rather the data hub that allows communication through the patient. Collaboration is the key to better health care here. And one of the, Anil's going to attest to this too, because he's got a system similar to mine, that to have collaborative care is the key to moving forward in a pay-for-performance, outcomes-based medical system. We are transferring from a fee-for-service-based system to an outcomes-based system, and that's going to require collaborative care. So I built a software tool for patients to manage their own health, and a personal health record and a data hub, but also to connect with a care coordinator who can manage a population of patients using my tool and the dashboard we created, and I'll show you what it looks like. The whole idea that we've got behind C3 HealthLink is to bring mindfulness to chronic disease management. And we've worked, and I have a grant application, and everybody cross their fingers right now that this grant application finally comes through from April. Working with Ellen Langer and the Langer Mindfulness Institute out of Harvard to look at patient monitoring and also patient specific mindfulness activities that can help those with chronic disease live better, longer, more productive lives. And she's got great data on that. Building intrinsic motivation to stay well and be well. So what we've done here is, built one part of our functionality is a medication management tool, so medication reminders, and you can easily report on your phone. These phones are a new way to engage patients that nobody's ever tried before. Who would have thought 10 years ago that you couldn't talk to your family because everybody's on a phone? And that engagement, the ability of that phone to engage people, is what we're trying to capture here by bringing an easy tool to manage your health. So you can see that the system also gives you compliance checks and reports back and a message to keep it up. Or if you're not compliant, it says, hey, take your medicine. And when we coordinate with a healthcare provider, we can send a message, click here to understand why you need to take your medicine, and take them to a non-HIPAA compliant educational site outside. I talked about mindfulness in this daily wellness check. When you leave your doctor's office, you get a prescription. Does everybody ever say to you, I want you to track how you're feeling. I want you to track how this medicine is working. Does it give you a side effect? I want to know about it, because if it does, I want to change the medicine before you worsen. This is what, I've been in clinical development for 30 years, and it's every prescription is a crapshoot. You don't know if it's going to work, not work, or give you a side effect, and it's very important for us to track how prescriptions work for us as we leave the doctor's office. We ask how your day, how's your mood, what kind of physical activity, what kind of stress are you under. We also have modules for specific disease indications like diabetes, obesity and weight loss, cardiovascular, asthma, COPD, and on the mental health side. And we bring mental health into everyday primary care. Depression, anxiety, eating disorders, addiction recovery. And addiction recovery is really very powerful. And lastly, we provide feedback on the phone with feedback on your wellness, on your compliance with medication and the survey, and how you're doing overall. As I said before, we're a data hub. We are device agnostic. We don't care what device you use or what app you use. We'll connect to it and form the data hub. We have a alliance partnership with iHealth that makes wireless glucose monitors, blood pressure cuffs, scales, and pulse oximetry, so we can have a full data look. We're also attached to Fitbit, and if you're familiar with any of the electronic health records, there's one that does this similar things, because these are open APIs. I'm happy to attach to anything that has an open API. because I have a patient-centric data hub. And once I have that data hub there, now I give a care coordinator, here, the ability to look at their entire patient population. When I first built the system, I only built it for the patients, and I talked to doctors about it, and they said, yeah, that's great, get out of here. And so they didn't see what we had. So we built a dashboard. And now this dashboard is the health management performance dashboard that allows the doctor and the nurse in the office to manage this population. And there's systems-driven triage in this to report which patients might need attention. You can send HIPAA-compliant messages. You can track your clients and see who else they're attached to. And you can use this HIPAA-compliant invitation process to build connections with the appropriate care team for your individual patient. So now we connect the providers in a system. You connect the patients in a system, whether it's an insurance company with their members or an accountable care organization that has many doctors, and put your patients on it. And then at will, you can form these connections for an on-demand, seamless, HIPAA-compliant data exchange and communication network. There's also a document sharing system, so when the patient goes to their medical record portal, you might have 7 of them, you're supposed to download your medical record. What do you do with them? Well, now I have a place for you to put them instead of on top of your refrigerator. And that's the quick start of that. Now, what does this mean for our topic today? We are a medical device that, as Danielle said in her pyramid here, we could be considered a medical device, but this is one of those discretionary areas because we are not tracking metabolic data like these devices are. These devices are Class 1 and Class 2 devices. They have to go through their FDA process. We don't, because we're just taking that data and reporting it. We're not making any diagnoses. We can provide general direction, take your medicine, but we're not saying take Lipitor, right? If we did that, then we'd be regulated differently. So we're in this gray area that FDA has defined with the recent guidance that was just published in February of this year. And anybody who wants a copy, you can go on the line. I can email it to you too. But it gives a very good understanding of what FDA is thinking right now. And I'll let Sunil talk here, and perhaps we can, get to that discussion a little bit more. There we go.
Is that better? Yeah. Once again, my name is Anil Thomas. The name of the company is Journey Health Labs. It's been a journey for me in building the company. It's been over 3 years. And as they say, overnight success didn't come to me. It was a long perseverance, a road of perseverance to achieve what we've achieved today. Now, I could tell you a whole bunch of stuff about technology, about my scalable back-end processing and scalable database structures and the UIs and everything else. But I'd like to simply leave this with you, that I'm in the relationship business. We label ourselves a patient relationship company. We stand in the gap between the provider and the patient and encourage the patient to keep moving on. Whatever the disease status wouldn't matter to me. I would just encourage that patient to move on. And that's our magic secret sauce. How we engage with that patient, how we encourage that patient to keep moving on. We have signed up few customers to be on our application, and we are now, I would say, a post-revenue company, building forward through several ventures and collaborative alliances. We are moving our product forward. With regards to the functionality itself, I would just pick Rich's slide and show you pretty much the same thing. We have mechanisms inside of it which will help the patient receive their education material. We have care plans and care tasks that remind you, by the way, your appointment is tomorrow, or by the way, take your Lipitor that's due at 6 p.m. And we remind you if you didn't do that. And we'll also, by the way, encourage you through your family network. To us, our family is the reason why I pick up the phone versus a phone number that I see that I don't recognize. And we use that technique to engage with our patients, because I know that if I'm not taking my medication, if my brother calls me, if my sister calls me, my wife calls me, you betcha I'm going to take it. I'm not going to get food that day. So we use different strategies in addition to common technologies to engage that patient, and we've been pretty successful. And our customer base has been primarily hospitals. We've also engaged with pharmacies and with other organizations that would like to have wellness programs going on. And so our technology can plug in various devices just as Rich's can. Several wearables have been plugged in as the need arises. However, we don't prescribe any medications ourselves, and so we are clear in the fact that we don't prescribe. We just push that messaging out to our patient base and allow them to take it or report back whether they have taken it or not. That's pretty much what my application does, and the application is aptly labeled Encourage. Thank you.
Good afternoon, evening. I'm Rick Weiss, and I'm the president of BioCare. And before I even get into my discussion about personalized nutrition, which is a little bit different than the last three speakers, I wanted to mention that it's been a little bit over 30 years since I gave my last presentation in this building. So I was an applied researcher at Bell Labs, and I started my career in this building, which is very exciting to be here. So thank you, Joanne, for the opportunity to come back. So a little bit different. Most people don't think of nutrition as really a mainstream of healthcare, but realize that 70% of chronic disease can lead its back into lifestyle. A lot of it is diet, and diet is very, very difficult to manage versus physical activity with the Fitbits and things like that. Oops, wrong way. So what is the purpose of BioCare? We're trying to basically help people eat better. That's really what it's all about, but we do it in a very unique way. So we're not like MyFitnessPal. We're not a direct-to-consumer opportunity. We're focusing on diet researchers and the clinician, and a little bit on the pharmaceutical side. So a little bit more about the company and what we do. We collaborate with a lot of world-known researchers. David Katz, you may have heard of. The others may not have. They're more into the diet area or epidemiologists. I don't know if most of you have heard of Small Business Innovation Research Grants. We're a big-time SBIR awardee, so we're up to $11 million so far in 25 grants, and I see more coming our way. The point of our technology, the focus of our technology is personalization. Education alone doesn't work. When you personalize in any area of healthcare, you get better results, and same thing with nutrition. So if you can target an individual with very pinpoint precision, exactly what to do, you'll get better success. It's very difficult to do that, and in most cases, it's done very manually, very costly, and so it's not reimbursable in the healthcare system. So I wanted to start off with a little bit of a range of things that we do and then go into the technology itself. So there are three areas that we mainly focus on: drug trials, clinical research, and the clinical environment as well. So right at the top, we've been involved with 5 or 6 clinical drug trials. The one I have on the top was a drug trial by a company called Tolerix that had a type 1 diabetes drug. And they used our technology both from a diet and a physical activity side, because the FDA came to them and said, instead of having free-living subjects do whatever they want, diabetes is so associated with diet and lifestyle, we want to know that while you're doing the trial, that people aren't changing on their own. So you need some kind of technique to be able to do that. So the chief medical officer, who came out of one of the Boston universities, had known of our company from previous career, contacted us, and we supported them on this worldwide drug trial. Unfortunately, the compound didn't work, and so it's no longer existing. But we're also working with UCSF on a fabulous trial called Health E-Heart. If you've heard of the Framingham trial, That's a big one that basically a lot of our cardiology knowledge about lifestyle came out of. He's trying to now take that concept and put it on the web. All electronic and have 1 million people tracked forever. So I think he's in the 20 or 30,000 people now, and he's actively recruiting. So if you're interested, he's looking for people to go to Healthy Heart. We're working with Columbia on a kidney failure patient application. Kidney failure has a very difficult lifestyle, and it's very difficult for a clinician to help an individual modify their diet to slow the progression of kidney failure. And eventually, they'll get into final renal failure and be on dialysis, which is very costly, both emotionally, lifestyle, and for the healthcare system. We're working with a university that's combining our technology, which is a dietary assessment component, biomarkers, and genetic testing of the microbiome. That's a really, really buzzy area right now. The gut is a fabulous place for now understanding a lot of how we work can be traced back to the gut. We also did some work in the Appalachia area in a high disparity environment where we were changing the lifestyle of the communities there to reduce cancer, to help with cancer prevention. We worked with VA on a metabolic control system for diabetes. Again, all of this is diet. So they had a difficulty of 3 dietitians for 10,000 diabetic patients. You're not going to spend a lot of time with your diabetic patients. So ours became a triage mechanism to identify those at highest risk, and then they could focus on those individuals. And finally, a group out of Ohio State was doing some work in an organic farm and bringing breast cancer individuals, newly diagnosed breast cancer individuals, and bringing them to the farm and helping them to learn how to newly eat and reduce the chance of reoccurrence. So again, back into what does our current system generally do on nutritional counseling? It's usually the pamphlet. It's usually discussions. It's very high level. My father-in-law had kidney failure, and when he left the hospital, he had 5 pieces of paper with, here's what you can eat, here's what you can't eat. It doesn't work. People with cardiovascular, with heart attacks, walk out of the hospital, and they can't think about how to change their lifestyle. So instead of that, what we try to do, what we do is focus on the idea of a path, like a Google map. We assess what you're doing now. We look at the gap of where you're at versus where you want to be or where you should be based on your disease or your situation, and then map out very specific changes. To be specific, if we identify that you're a cardiovascular patient and we want to lower the saturated fat, even though saturated fat may or may not be truly a bad food, but let's say it is, and you're in the South and you eat fried chicken, an opportunity may be, with our tool, we can identify the highest saturated fat foods in your diet, find out that fried chicken is the #1 food that you eat most of your saturated fat, and suggest broiled chicken instead. But if that isn't the food that you want, as a Southerner, you may not want to give up your fried chicken. You may go to a next food, which may be something else like ice cream or something else. So it gets down to making the right choices and then making sure the individual can accept that choice. Because if they can't do it, why bother changing it, right? Because they'll go back, like most diets, 6 months later, you're back to what you were eating, and you gain back the weight or get back to the situation you were in. So specifically onto the technology. And I'm only going to talk about 2. We've got more than 2, but the 2 main technologies that we've developed or are developing. This is our main foundation system. It's called BioScreen. It's based on a technique called the Food Frequency Questionnaire, which is used in epidemiological studies. So Framingham, Harvard Nurses, Women's Health Initiative have all used paper-based forms. We worked with one of the leading epidemiologists at Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center, who did the FFQ for the Women's Health Initiative, put it on the web, and the main thing is we added 1,200 pictures of food portion sizes. So it doesn't sound that innovative, but no one had ever done that before. And so we also changed the flow. We did some other things, so it's more than that. But I think the biggest innovation was really just showing people a picture of 6 plates of spaghetti of different portion sizes. So when you say you eat spaghetti, tell me how much you eat, and then we analyze it. So we ran a validation study at Ohio State, and our accuracy compared to the paper FFQs through the roof. So what we've done is, for our very inexpensive tool, within 20 or so minutes, can tell a physician or a patient exactly what they're eating and analyze it. So it becomes a very, very simple thing. There's lots of reports. I won't go through the list. We'll move on and get to Q&A a little faster. But What I was saying about the fried chicken is the main outcome of something like this. We can get down to a specific nutrient or a food pattern and identify all the foods that contribute into that area. We're working now with a supplement company and looking at something called the Healthy Eating Index. So it's like giving someone a score, a grade. It's actually a point score from 1 to 100, 100 perfect, and saying, okay, let's identify your diet patterns based on US dietary guidelines. You're a 64. Now here are specific things within the score. If you change, you can raise your score and give you the feedback. So that's in development right now. The next tool, which usually gives my company the biggest buzz, is a product that we call Fiverr. So this is an ongoing SBIR-funded project. We have a phase 2 SBIR right now. It stands for Mobile Food Intake Visualization and Voice Recognition System. But ultimately, the bottom line is what we do is it's a mobile app. You take a short video of your plate of food, and we automatically identify the food and the portion size. So if anybody's used any of the food trackers out there, I imagine if every one of you used one, probably about 5 of you are still using it, and the rest have put it in the drawer, like a Fitbit. It's very, very hard to do food tracking over a period of time. So the idea was, well, how can we reduce the burden and have people use it longer? So National Cancer Institute was very, very interested in this. I actually wrote a white paper on this 10 years ago before smartphones and said this is the only way we're going to get around it is using something like a smartphone. They want to track 100,000 people 2 days a year. That's all. But if you can get 100,000 people to continuously do that 2 days a year, we'd find a lot about the environment, a lot about what people do and how that some people end up in cancer. So this is a picture of some of the mobile app, and literally it works. We've done it. It works in the lab. In the lab, we're within 5% accuracy of the volume of the weight of the food. So the big trick right now with the phase 2 is scaling it, getting it up so that we have, instead of 200 or 300 foods, which we recognize, to getting up to 20,000 foods, which makes it viable in a commercial sense. So a little bit of details, because I just think it's a very cool innovation, is when we take a picture, we get down to the point where we literally draw lines around the individual pieces of food. We segment the food, we find the plate, and from that point, we can extract and basically recreate the food in mathematical three-dimensional rendering and count the pixels. Basically, count the pixels, and when you add up all the pixels, then we get a volume. We convert the volume to a density, and then convert that into a health record, a food record, and then store it away. So it's very, very cool. Yeah. And so basically, again, most people don't think of diet as an important aspect of health. But the reality is that we got to look at the whole person, be holistic, and it should be biomarkers, genetics, metadata, dietary data, demographics, all together. We should be working all together and store all this information, and that's how you end up feeding things to the healthcare system, whether it's research, clinicians, or ultimately to the consumer. So, thank you very much. Thank you.
It was a good length of time for interaction now. I just want to share a little something. We did a conference about 2 weeks ago on the Internet of Medical Things, looking at cybersecurity in devices and so on. And one of our speakers who is really on the side of data openness was John Wilbanks from Sage Bionetworks. And they've developed a way of putting informed consent into the phone. So I just want to share that, and they've been able to, they're working on some Parkinson's studies, and they're also using the phone to like measure gait, have somebody put their phone in their pocket and walk, and so on. But that in terms of massive sign up of people, they've been able to get 67,000 people signed up for their study in like 3 months. So that was a happy story I can bring you from another program we did. I'm going to hand you the there's questions for the other guys.
Oh, thanks. All right. I thought all your presentations were very lovely. I was wondering, you've kind of explained where yours sat in terms of that nebulous zone of enforcement discretion. But I'd like the rest of you guys to give a little blurb about where your devices, present, past, and current ones, have gone through the FDA process, and maybe that would help some of the audience understand how it needed to take place to get to where you are today.
Well, we looked at it from the point of whether we were actually involved in the prescription process. And we determined through use of lawyers and other people that have reviewed this that we were not involved in the actual prescription process itself, rather delivery of information. And hence we determined that we were not in that regime of having to put this through the FDA. However, since you've brought up a few points, we would definitely go back and take a look to see if it is going to fall in that area or not. But at this point, as Rich mentioned, it seems like we are in that area which is considered gray, and they could go either ways. And we want to stay away from actual suggestions, providing suggestions or healthcare suggestions of any sort. We want to stay purely in the conduit business, the delivery of data back to the down to the patient and back up from the patient.
So for our mainstream work that we're doing now directly with either clinical research or the clinicians, we don't have to be FDA approved at all, because we're diet oriented, and we're the same thing. We're not diagnosing anything. We're just collecting data, analyzing, and providing the results. But there are two sidebars on this. So one is when we do clinical trials, we did go through a process. Now, fortunately for my company, we didn't have to do it. We provided all the information to Tolerex, who then provided, and there was a lot of go back and forth to make sure that we were, it was pre-HIPAA, so it was right security, the right data was collected, that we could ensure transparency in all the data that we collected, and did it the right way. Going forward, as I mentioned with like kidney failure, that's going to start getting us at least very close, if not over the line, depending on how far we go. So if you're starting to prescribe someone to change their diet to support their disease, now technically you're right, it's starting to be that. And if you treat food, it really is a drug in that case, then I'm not sure where we're going to go. Now, I stay in touch with the FDA to make sure that we don't cross the line without them telling us that we need to do something. So I expect in the future, in the near future, we probably will have to be more engaged with FDA.
I have a question of you, though.
Go ahead.
In my interpretation of the FDA guidance, I do have to register my company and then list my product. Correct?
That is as far as I know as well.
So, can you talk about the process? Talk about the process of listing and registration.
See, that's a little out of my scope,
Okay.
Unfortunately. When I was working at Johnson & Johnson developing devices, they were all early phase developmental, and we never really got to the final registration process before our department kind of got chewed up and displaced.
So, from my understanding anyway, and if anybody from the audience has more information on this, because we are in this gray area, we can list our device, register our company as a manufacturer, and list our device, but there's no pre-market notification necessary, and there's no 510K or any other approvals required. So I just have to wait 30 days after I list before I can sell something, and that's my understanding now, unless somebody else from FDA is here.
It sounds about right. I mean, I think it would take a little bit of digging and looking through the FDA guidances, and I know they have mobile medical apps guidance that's very well detailed, and that probably provides some additional information in there. So, does anyone have any questions for any of the speakers, including myself?
Any one of you, I'm loud enough. No? Okay. I just wanted to find out about mobile app for patient-informed consent. Do you know if it falls under any of the regulations or anything like that, or do we have to go to the FDA? You mentioned patient-informed consent.
I didn't directly, but I can tell you we do a lot of grants, we do a lot of research. So we do informed consents. We've done it not on the mobile side, but we've done it on the website, because everything in even though we have a mobile app, we also have a web orientation too. So we do web informed consents, and we have to go through an IRB always to get approval.
So that, to me, it's not an FDA thing because it's a grant, but we have to do IRB approvals. It's as a requirement from an NIH grant standpoint.
I can address that in regard to CMS payment requirements for chronic care coordination. There's a CPT code that CMS came out with in January, 99490, and it pays $40 per patient per month for non-face-to-face care coordination. It requires an informed consent form, and right now it's paper. In order for the informed consent piece to be integrated with the app, it would have to go through some kind of analysis. But for me right now, we're doing it with paper as guided by CMS and uploading that paper record to the health locker so the patient has a PDF file that shows their informed consent. And I plan on using that in clinical research as well as we move forward with a couple of clinical trial products. My background's in clinical research, so the informed consent process is very well defined by FDA. You have got to explain the benefits and the risks of your program. You have to write the informed consent at the level of a sixth grader, fifth grader in that regard in terms of reading proficiency. And this is, Schulman IRB knows all this stuff about informed consent. But we're using paper right now, and as far as the electronic version, I do not know the process of getting that approved. Do you know, Sudhil?
No. Yeah.
Excuse me, I'm going to ask Danielle, would you define IRB? Maybe everybody here doesn't.
Sure. An IRB is an institutional review board. We're an ethics department that handles the review of clinical trials to make sure they meet certain standards. And we don't necessarily look only at ethics, but we also look at the design of the study and make sure that it's a reasonable study that's going to produce results for the client and make sure it has reasonable outcomes. So it's not a waste of your time, our time, and the patient's time. So that's kind of what we do, and we look at everything from the informed consent documents, the protocol, any associated documents, any documents that the patient may see, any electronic files if they're doing surveys online, all of that gets reviewed by the IRB.
So the manufacturing of medical devices requires a process of validation to ensure that devices do what they were intended to do. With the fact that you guys are dosing or making not recommendations, but ensuring that patients have taken the right amount of doses, have you given thought to validating your applications?
Yeah, my application is fully validated, and it's gotten through third-party approvals for ONC and for HIPAA compliance. So there are processes that are software validation tools it has to go through, yeah.
So since the patient does not have the ability to change the dosage amounts or any other mechanism other than to say, yes, I have taken or I have not taken. So there is no change in the actual prescription itself.
I took it, and if it says, all right, I'm showing you didn't take it, and they take it again, and they take it again, and there's a bug in the application, you're at risk.
Obviously, that is an issue if there was a bug in that kind of a thing where they can hit it 3 times. However, we have mechanisms in place, just like you would do in a browser where you hit this reload 3 times. That's essentially what you're saying. It's similar in that sense that I've hit it 3 times and I've said yes 3 times. But we don't count that as 3 times, as having taken 3 times. So we have techniques within our applications to capture the first time as to what you've said, or if you haven't taken it, then you've got a period of time, a grace period, during which time you can come back and say, yes, I took it, or no, I didn't take it. But by hitting a button 3 times does not mean that you took it 3 times. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I think if there's a bug in the system, that's what validation's for, right?
That's right. Well, yes. So before, in the case of any healthcare app, it needs to go through a rigorous testing, which is a healthcare level of testing that it needs to undergo, and we've undertaken that. We found bugs that needed to be cleared out, and it's only then that we can actually release it into the market. So we've actually done that.
And I just want to add to that a little bit. These are all processes that would be done preclinical trial, where they do the validation verification process, and then you may, once you have a final product that you're ready to test out, then you would send it out for a clinical trial to see if it does work in the way that it's intended to work. So there's different levels. And of course, you can do a proof of principle study prior to that as well for a really early phase, and maybe it's just a mock-up drawing on paper showing the screens of what would take place, and that would be a very early clinical trial, and then followed by the development of your device, verification, validation, et cetera.
So I realize we don't have FDA representation on this panel, so it might be kind of hard to answer this question, but can you guys at least speculate on what the FDA's interest in applications and even just the cultural changes that come out of products like these, and not just the FDA, but other government bodies like NIH or the National Cancer Institute, or and not specifically regulation on and narrowly in terms of like product safety, because obviously that's a concern. And as you start getting more towards analytics becoming more diagnostic, then you start to get into that area. So even just beyond that, in terms of promoting wellness and understanding and education, what is the interest of these government entities on these types of products? Did I state that well?
No, that was a good question. I'll start off real quick and just say that it is an area of growing interest, because with new technology, there's always new areas for potential risk to subjects, and new areas where there can be healthcare managed, and they're always looking to just make sure that they meet those basic criteria, just as they do with other devices. So this is a growing area that they're just looking to expand and learn more about as well, and they're trying to provide guidances which are very new and help the general public out with what they're supposed to do with these types of devices.
It's a great question, Carlos. There's two paths I think that this can go, because we've got the general health and wellness push, and I think that the marketplace is going to push that as we move from a fee-for-service environment to a pay-per-performance environment. We're going to recognize what is pay-per-performance and what is shared savings, and how are we going to reimburse the healthcare system to keep doctors in the game. Because if the reimbursement models are not there to support our apps, to support the use of the dietary tool so we can make money, the whole system's going to fall apart, and all the talk in the world won't change how we end up feeling at the end of the day. But then there's the other point where, I mentioned the grant that I'm going after, and I want to talk to you, Rick, because getting $11 million of SBIR grants, people. That's good. But with using the app for specific use in chronic disease management to promote mindfulness, using mindfulness exercises for a better outcome, if I can claim that, for example, with Ellen's work, she's done it with paper right now. She's demonstrated with ALS patients who are chronic and it's a deadly disease and it's a debilitating disease. She's demonstrated that she's able to get patients to live longer and their quality of life is maintained for a longer period of time. If I can use an app to make a claim that in chronic disease like MS, that I can improve the life and quality of life of people with MS using my app, I'll get a reimbursement for it, and that'll be the FDA process I'll go through at that point.
Things are changing very rapidly in the healthcare market, as is in all the other markets, because of new technologies and mobile apps and so on. And new ways of treatments are coming out that the FDA needs to look into, and they are looking into, including, you may have heard of telehealth. CMS is starting to support telehealth, so then the technologies around telehealth is going to be a big deal. Mobile apps are going to play a big role in that space. There was a time, not too long ago, when we thought the web was the biggest thing on the planet, the websites. Tell me how many of us go to the website and log in. We seldom do. Why? Because mobile apps are here. The websites are going the way of the emails. If you say, I'll send you an email, I hope to get the response maybe in a few hours, whereas if I text you, I'm going to get a response almost immediately. So things are evolving very rapidly, and the landscape has great opportunities for lots of entrepreneurs to go in there and look at the way to change healthcare for the better, to maximize healthcare for a majority using little. So there's tremendous opportunities. However, there are challenges with regards to consent, with regards to privacy, with regards to someone clicking on a button several times. These are challenges, but then again, these are not new challenges. It just so happens to be in a new sphere, in a new technology space. But they've been around for a long time.
So I'll just add one very specific area. In my discussion, it's mostly with NIH, but I can tell you with NIH, the big buzz is on interoperability. So we had a grant that actually got a perfect score, and one of the main components of that grant was, instead of patient-centered medical home, patient-centered medical neighborhood, with the idea that healthcare professionals who are in the neighborhood are not associated with a health system need to interoperate, need to coordinate with the main primary care physician. Well, if you look at the EMR systems that the government spent a lot of money in implementing, most of them were silos, and we didn't see a lot of gains. So Epic was beaten up the last couple of years. On this grant, we worked with Ohio State University, which is an Epic system. We were told by the person ahead of the Epic system at Ohio State that it was going to be at least a year to 18 months before she could even talk to us about working with us directly. Now that was 2 years ago, so now she's more open, and now there's more in place to force the EMR organizations, the big ones especially, to open up and provide more accessibility to be able to move data back and forth. And of course, the health information exchanges are out there as well. So I think that's the next wave, is making sure that our health system, someone from one hospital can communicate with another hospital in case they have an emergency and can get that data very quickly.
First, I want to check, do any of the panelists want to make a further final? That was a lovely concluding comments, unless there's anybody here who wants to say more. You all right? Oh, great. Well, thank you. First, we're gonna adjourn, and you will have a chance to ask the panelists individually. So I promise we have to have time for our reception. We need supper, right? But I would like to give a round of applause for the panel. Thank you very much. And I just want to appreciate that everyone's here, and to really encourage you, all of our programs come from ideas where somebody says, did you ever think about whatever that is? And so we really like to hear from you. We often put out calls for abstracts. All of you are now on our email list, so you're going to be hearing from us from time to time. But please feel free to pick up the phone or send a note. We just had a discussion earlier with something that gave me an idea, and I've made notes, and we're going to follow up on that. But sometimes it's a question of something you know about, something you would like to know about. These are all really great ways to start a program. So thank you all. Thank you.